Hi everyone. So the situation is that we have this false belief and understanding that somehow multinational organizations and big industry and business makes money and makes the world a better place. It somehow creates greater wealth and opportunity and creates a better place. We have this fallacious understanding that somehow we can live better lives if business is strong and if business is doing well. So we tend to vote for political parties that are on the right. We tend to vote for political parties that support business. We tend to vote for political parties that espouse the virtues of industry and business. We tend to think that political parties on the right do better business. We tend to think that political parties on the right manage economies better. So as a result, the vast majority of times, we believe that it is better to vote on the right to ensure that we have better lives. Let me tell you, it's all completely false. It's all completely untrue and couldn't be further from the opposite. We are at polar ends with reality. Polar ends. You see, let me first of all exemplify that during the GFC, the global financial crisis, approximately 10 or so years ago, the very first thing to fall was big industry. Big businesses. Big businesses, the ones that were too big to fail, were the first to fall. The first to be bailed out by trillions of dollars of taxpayer money, of people that have worked all their lives. Instead of that money going into hospitals and schools and everything else, that money was pumped into supporting and preventing the collapse of the largest corporations in the world. Let me tell you that during this crisis with COVID-19, again, it is trillions of dollars of taxpayer money around the world that has been pumped into the biggest industries, the biggest companies, to save them from collapsing. If these industries were doing so well, if these companies were such a success story, if capitalism was such a success story, then why is it that at every single rattle, they fall apart like a deck of cards? And the governments around the world have to go into massive debt to come in and bail them out from yours and my money. Whilst for years they struggled to pay any kind of money, decent money, toward technological advance in healthcare, climate technology, public education, public hospitals. Why? Yet they can find trillions of dollars overnight to bail out the so-called successful corporations of the world. Because these companies, in effect, are not the solution to humanity's future. They are not the solution to the future of nature and to the future of any other creature on this planet. In fact, we are destroying this planet. I can tell you from personal experience, the way companies operate inside. The way companies operate inside is utter chaos. Because, for example, managers get profits or bonuses and get larger pay if they meet certain targets. And those certain targets are based on minimizing outlays, expenditure, and increasing or maximizing profit. So, for example, there are managers that say, wow, the company is doing too well, it's too busy, we can't keep up the work, so target-wise, we are not meeting client expectations, we are in the red. They're actually happier when they're in the green because it means that they're not in the red. It means that they're meeting the targets. But instead of hiring more people, instead of looking after the company at large, they actually try to ensure that the targets look great, expenditure is low, and profit is maximized by pushing everyone to the absolute limits, but within the confines of what is actually and realistically achievable by, say, the 100 people that work there, as opposed to employing another 50 or 100 people, because that would mean less bonus, less money in their pocket. The long-term goal, the long-term benefit of a corporation is inconsistent with the short-term targets and interests that most managers are required to meet in order to get their profit, in order to get their benefits. I've seen it happen. I know it's like this. That's why corporations are in chaos inside and they fall apart at the smallest international rattle. You just can't handle it. And they have to be bailed out by the public sector, by people. And yet we are told that somehow they are industrious and do an incredible job and that private business, private enterprise is the best. Well, we've seen now twice within 10 to 15 years how fallacious that is. The long-term interests of companies and businesses are inconsistent with the short-term interests of the vast majority of their managers. I know that for a fact. I've seen it. Just as it is in the short-term interests of nature, of climate, and of people who are stressed to the limit in these organizations and companies, doing increasingly greater amounts of work with less people to support each other, just to make more profit in this increasingly multinational competitive environment where people backstab each other just to survive. And we'll do whatever it takes to subvert the interests of nature, of climate, of people at large, of species dying out, going through another extinction. It's what we're doing, mass extinction on this planet. And somehow we're told that this works best. Well, what a fallacy. How much more of an example do we need than the last 10 to 15 years that this is so untrue? We have increasing numbers of people homeless. We have increasing numbers of middle-class families turning to charities who are themselves increasingly underfunded, supported by lack of opportunity, capacity. Increasing number of middle-class families turning to charities for survival. Increasing numbers of people are so depressed that they're increasingly on antidepressants, other forms of psychotic drugs, to dumb down the pain, to forget the pain of stress and anxiety and pressure, and arguments that arise as a result within families, within friendships, within workplaces, within society. It's a fallacy that the long-term interests of society, that the long-term interests of an individual in society is business, business, business. Because business, business, business is not even capable of surviving without the socialization of debt. Everyone throws around now this very well-known but true assertion that we privatize the profits and socialize the debt, because that's exactly what's happening. And if capitalism was so successful, if business was so successful, if enterprise was so successful, then why is it that we need to socialize the debt? It is because otherwise it all falls over. Governments in the GFC had to secure people's savings in banks just to make sure there's no run on the banks. It doesn't all fall over overnight. The long-term interest of society is a social perspective. It's a society that works together cooperatively. It's not a dog-eat-dog society, a competitive society that is a race to the bottom where we're seeing everything fall apart, where there's an increasing number of diseases and problems, climatic change, social concern. A decent society is a social society, a society based on society itself, not on dog-eat-dog, but on people working together, on socializing work. I was going to say industry, but you don't have to call it industry. You just call it work. On socializing productivity, on socializing the products of nature, so that we do it for social purposes and social benefit, not for individual benefit, which tears people apart, to say the least. Not only does it damage everything, it tears people apart. We want to live in a society, not in isolation. It's a fallacy that somehow capitalism is the best to date at achieving outcomes for the individual and for people at large. It's a fallacy, and we're seeing the fallacy fall apart. If we want to save our world, if we want to save nature, if we want to save each other from going crazy and from getting all these chronic diseases, from all the stress, lack of opportunity to even cook proper food at home after work, if we want to save animals from going extinct, and we have to change the nature of society. We have to start socializing society. We have to start thinking long-term, not short-term targets. We have to start thinking about everybody, not just ourselves, about how can I survive? How can I do this? How can I do that in this society? We have to think about us. And to be honest, this is not a joke, it's reality. You just have to walk down the street and see the depression, see the problems that people are facing and suffering everywhere, see the problems that nature is suffering. So it's time to forget this fallacy. It's time to no longer believe in this fallacy. You know, I've been arguing for some time that the true idealist, the true utopian, is not the one that thinks socially, it's the one that thinks capitalistically. The true utopian is the one that tries to sell you a fantasy, something that is not real, a utopia in their own heads, that somehow capitalism and industry and business will make things work, and somehow that's the best way to achieve the best results for everybody, or for the vast majority. That is a fallacy. That's the real utopia. It's not a utopia to think socially, to care about nature, to care about the world, to care about us, to survive in the long term. That's not utopia. That's necessary if we want to survive. The utopia is the unrealistic, unattainable, fantastic lie, fallacy that somehow capitalism works best. Just a lie. It's benefited a very few people at the greatest expense possible for everything else, including for them in the long term, because it all falls apart, just even, for example, from a simple disease. Thanks.